Hello, and welcome to Introducing Me. I'm your host, Sarah. I started this podcast to get to know other people and lifestyles while discovering more about myself. Each episode, I'll give a new guest a chance to discuss their background, culture, interests, or whatever they want to talk about to help increase all of our own worldviews. Today, I'd like to introduce you to Ken Kunken. In Ken's college years, he sustained a spinal cord injury, rendering him quadriplegic before the American Disabilities Act even existed. But he went on to complete multiple degrees and became an assistant district attorney, where recently an award was named after him. Ken is a proud husband, parent, and author, here to share his story today. So thank you so much, Ken. Why don't you go ahead and tell the audience more about yourself?
Thank you. Well, I think the best place to start is probably at my injury that you mentioned. On October 31st, 1970, I was playing on the lightweight team at Cornell University, and on a kickoff in a game against Columbia University, I broke my neck making a tackle during the kickoff. And as a result, I'm what's called a C4-5 quadriplegic, meaning I broke my neck between the fourth and fifth cervicals in the neck. And as a result, I'm almost totally paralyzed. I have just a little bit of movement in my left arm and nothing in my right. So I'm dependent on others for virtually every aspect of my activities of daily living.
So knowing that that happened, in the 70s and you're here, you've done so many great things since then. What was, those first weeks and months like after that injury?
Well, obviously, they were the worst and lowest moments in my life. I mean, I would spend 9 months and 20 days in various hospitals and rehabilitation centers. And I was very frustrated because the medical personnel seemed to not want to answer any of my questions. I was kept in the dark pretty much about everything. I knew I broke my neck, but I didn't know much about a spinal cord injury or what that entailed. And I was very worried about what my future would look like. And I was particularly upset when I got a hold of a pamphlet published by the rehab center that I was at that seemed to indicate that the best I might ever be able to do would be to sell magazine subscriptions over the telephone. Now, I believed there was still more that I could do, and I was determined to do as much with my life as I possibly could. So I knew that as a result of my physical limitations, I needed to make the most of my mental abilities. I knew I needed to return to school and get the best education possible. So 11 days after I was discharged from the rehab center, I returned to Cornell University and I resumed my studies in industrial engineering.
And so, what was that studying like at Cornell? How, since the American Disabilities Act didn't exist yet, like what was getting around campus and doing your schoolwork like?
Well, Cornell was probably one of the least accessible schools I could have decided to go back to. It's on a very hilly terrain in upstate Ithaca, New York. In addition to its cold, snowy winters, virtually every one of its buildings had steps in front of it. And there was not one ramp or curb cut on the entire campus. One of the classes that I took, which met 3 times a week, was located in a building that had 16 steps in front of it. And my dorm was located in a building that had 10 steps just to get in. So on my first day of classes, I had to be either pulled up or bounced down close to 100 steps just to attend my first day. And to make matters worse, because of my physical limitations, I couldn't even take notes when I was listening in on the lectures.
So then, without notes, obviously to pass classes and to continue going on shows your mental abilities were you were firing them. You were working hard for those degrees. So what was it like, getting any sort of accommodations, if they were even called that, when you were in school, so that you could pass your classes and continue on in your education?
I think Cornell really wanted to be helpful, but they just didn't really know or understand what the needs of somebody with my type of disability had. And neither did I, quite frankly. I mean, I was new to being disabled, and I had just been out of the hospital 11 days when I returned to school. So it was the classic example of the blind leading the blind. And by trial and error, I tried to find the best way that I could function. And ultimately, I gave carbon paper and notebook paper to fellow classmates to try and get copies of their notes when I was in class. And fortunately, my personal care attendants and my fellow classmates gave me a lot of help that enabled me to continue my education.
So then what was your career and education path like after you graduated from Cornell?
Well, I thought that I should continue in the area I had been studying when I was injured, and that was industrial engineering. And all through my undergraduate and high school, junior high school, elementary school days, my strongest area was in mathematics. And that's why I was pursuing a career in engineering. But I found really after my injury and even before, I found engineering just really wasn't a viable field for me. And after my injury, I knew that I wanted to devote my life and my career to helping others, and in particular, helping those who had disabilities or were experiencing life altering diseases or problems. So I decided to pursue a career in counseling. And after graduating from Cornell in 1973, I stayed on at Cornell and earned a Master of Arts degree in counseling and student personnel administration. And I became the first quadriplegic to ever graduate from first Cornell as an undergrad and also Cornell as a graduate student. So I'm the first quadriplegic to obtain both of those degrees at Cornell. And then to increase my counseling credentials, I went to Columbia University, where I obtained a Master of Education degree in psychological counseling and rehabilitation, and decided to look for a job in the rehabilitation counseling field. And to my dismay, no one would hire me. In 1975, 76, everyone seemed to feel I was too disabled to work. And in fact, I was even turned down when I offered to volunteer my services. But I knew that I could work and make a significant contribution to some company or organization. So I continued my job search until I finally found one organization willing to give me the opportunity to show what I could do. And that was Abilities Incorporated, which was part of what was then called the Human Resources Center and is now called the Viscardi Center after its founder, Dr. Henry Viscardi Jr. And they are located in Albertson, Long Island. And I worked there as a vocational rehabilitation counselor. And I loved the work that I was doing there and really appreciated that opportunity to help others who had physical disabilities. And it made me feel so much better about myself being able to work and to help others after me being the recipient of so much help.
And so, you finally got this job. It really, boosted yourself, gave you these opportunities and these chances to really show like I earned those degrees, like I am employable. Where did your career then go? And how long were you there doing that before you decided to continue on?
Well, I worked at the Human Resources Center for a little over 2 years. And I had a lot of different duties at the center, but one of them was speaking before groups and organizations concerning the topics of non-discrimination and affirmative action for people with disabilities. And often after my talks, I would be asked questions. And while I would certainly do my best to answer those questions, I was always very careful to caution the questioners that they should really consult with a lawyer about their concerns. And I guess it didn't take long before I decided, there's no reason why I couldn't become that lawyer. And at the time, I also had an older brother named Steve who was working as a lawyer as a public defender on Long Island. And I used to watch him in court as well. And between watching my brother and doing these talks at the Viscardi Center, I decided that law looked like a very viable field for me. So I left the center and went to Hofstra University School of Law.
And so then what was it like having a career in law as a quadriplegic?
Well, obviously it posed a lot of challenges, but I was fortunate that I did an internship at the Nassau County District Attorney's Office. And while I was working there, I found a new way that I could help people and serve the community. And I knew that I wanted to devote my life and my career to helping others. And working at the district attorney's office seemed like the perfect place for me to do it. But it was really difficult. Here I was, a trial attorney, and I didn't know of any other trial attorneys who were quadriplegics. And certainly I didn't know of any who were assistant district attorneys. So it was very challenging to go to court and try and do a trial, a criminal trial, when it was difficult for me to take notes or even turn pages. What I used to do was copy the case files, have somebody punch holes in them, and put them in a 3-ring notebook. And with braces and splints, with a lot of difficulty, I could turn pages. And it was very difficult and challenging to try and keep all the evidence and the notes straight in my mind. And a lot of it was basically relying on my memory. So it posed a lot of challenges, but I worked really hard to become a competent assistant district attorney.
And so then, you've had this career as an assistant district attorney. What were some of your biggest highlights throughout that career?
Well, I would say initially, when I first started doing trials in our district court bureau, I was approached by a defense attorney who told me that he overheard some of the prisoners talking about me in the pens behind the courtroom. And the prisoners were saying that I was a really tough ADA, and they hoped they didn't get the guy in the wheelchair as their prosecutor. So that was a big boost when I heard even the prisoners seemed to be afraid of getting the guy in the wheelchair as their prosecutor. And when I'd go to court, I had a lot of help and support from the court officers. They were really helpful in trying to get me to be able to function as best I could. And my first problem was I found I couldn't even fit through the swinging doorways in the courtroom. They were too narrow to allow me to pass through in my electric wheelchair. So that was the first obstacle that I faced. But with some minor modifications to the courtrooms, I was able to function and go before a judge and the jury and present a case and do direct examinations and cross-examinations and admit items into evidence. And I found once I started talking, most jurors treated me just like they would any other attorney. And I was very pleased to find out from them afterwards that once I started talking, they completely forgot about the fact that I was in a wheelchair. And as a result, I had a lengthy career as a prosecutor where over the course of my career, I tried 76 cases, 65 of which were felonies. I presented 252 cases to the grand jury and conducted 118 pretrial hearings. So my numbers of litigation were consistently among the highest in my bureau. And as a result, I was promoted a number of times where I eventually became a deputy bureau chief, where I was helping supervise more than 25 other assistant district attorneys. So I really enjoyed the work that I was doing and was given so much support and encouragement by my office, as well as by the court officers who actually presented me with an award after I started working there. So I very much enjoyed my career as a prosecutor. And when you combine my full-time work with part-time work that I did there, I worked in the district attorney's office for more than 40 years.
So a long-standing career with lots of great work done. And to hear how, the prisoners saw you and how jurors saw you, shows, the work that you were doing and, how you're able to, exist and be in society trying cases. So I mentioned that there was an award named after you. So do you want to share a little bit about what that was like having that happen?
Oh, I was very thrilled and surprised with when I decided to retire. The district attorney of Nassau County decided to name an award after me that's given annually, the Kenneth J. Kunken Award, in recognition of my devotion to the work, my experience as a trial attorney, and my attitude, perseverance, and hard work in the office. And that is the only award the district attorney's office gives out on an annual basis. And they named it after me, the guy in the wheelchair, because they felt that I was making an enormous impression and influence on the other ADAs and the public in general. And I might add that in the district attorney's office, when you leave the job, you usually go through an exit interview. And during that exit interview, you're asked what were the best parts of the job and what parts do you feel could be improved upon. And on a number of occasions, I was told that ADAs had said the best part of their job was meeting, getting to know me, and working with me. And the reason why I want to comment on that is not to boast or brag, but it's because the ADAs were really referring to meeting, getting to know, and working with somebody who had a severe disability. Because unless you had a relative with a severe disability, very few people come into daily contact with somebody with a disability, particularly in the workplace. And one of the things, of course, they commented on was that I usually had a positive attitude and a pleasant demeanor. But I think what was maybe most important to them was that I was a hard worker and it didn't involve any additional work for them to have me working in the office. In fact, I was often producing more work and doing more than many of my colleagues.
Yes, it sounds like an award that was well deserved to be named after you. And you can hear as you talk about your career and your life experiences, just like how much joy you would have brought into those working spaces. Now, you've referred to yourself at least once as, the guy in the wheelchair. So, and even just going into the courtroom for the first time, that the doors weren't wide enough. What have you seen over time in accommodations, whether that you've experienced directly or you've seen for other folks?
Well, when I was first injured and went back to school, and even later on the job, before the Americans with Disabilities Act, very few facilities were actually wheelchair accessible. So it was not unusual when I went out anywhere that I was the only person that I would see in a wheelchair, and especially in an electric wheelchair, because you just couldn't get around. So wherever I went, I was usually stared at by people because it was so unusual to see somebody in my condition out in public. If I went to a restaurant, somebody would be feeding me lunch or dinner. I would constantly be stared at by everybody in the restaurant. If I went to a movie theater or to a Broadway show or virtually anywhere, wherever I went, I seemed to attract attention, unwanted attention, I might add, because I just wanted really to blend in with the crowd. But wherever I went, I was constantly stared at. Now, thanks to the Americans with Disabilities Act, it is far more common to see people with all different types of disabilities out in public and in the workplace. And it is great to see the changes that have evolved as a result of that.
Definitely. So because, you've lived through, the act even just coming to fruition, how were you like able to stay positive and continue going out when you were getting this unwanted attention and not just, oh, I could just stay home and not get this unwanted attention?
I was really fortunate that I've had a very supportive family and a very supportive group of friends who encouraged me and helped motivate me every step of the way. And they helped me so much that after a while, I felt I'd be letting them down if I didn't do everything I could possibly do. And without exactly saying the words, I know they kind of reassured me that they would act as my arms and legs to make sure I could do everything that I wanted to do. So when you get that type of help and support, how could you not do as much with your life as you possibly?
And so then what has it been like? You've got a lot of great family support. I mentioned, that you are a husband and a father. So what has that part of your journey been like?
Ugh, that is the best part of my journey. And there are no accomplishments that I am more proud of than those of being a good husband and a good father. So if I could just comment on that for a minute, after my injury, I decided that I wanted to do my best not to let the injury prevent me from doing any of the things that I would have wanted to do had I not been injured. And that included dating. Like many men, I wanted to meet and have a satisfying relationship with the perfect woman for me. And as you might expect, dating when you're a quadriplegic and trying to impress a woman when you're almost totally paralyzed poses its own unique set of challenges. But I was fortunate. It took me a while, but I eventually met the perfect woman for me. Her name is Anna. She's actually sitting next to me now to my right. And Anna's the most incredible person that I've ever met. And I guess what they say that opposites attract really holds true for us because Anna and I are different in so many ways. I mean, for one, Anna's 19 years younger than I am. Anna was born and raised in Poland, while I've spent almost my entire life on Long Island. Anna is Catholic and I am Jewish. Anna's over 6 feet tall, and I'm just under 5'8", and even shorter in the wheelchair. Anna's a vegetarian, and I love to eat meat. And Anna's in exceptional physical condition, and I'm almost totally paralyzed. But it just seemed like a match made in heaven. There was a certain magic, a certain chemistry between us that you just can't put into words. And in 2003, Anna and I were married. So we've already celebrated our 21st wedding anniversary. But it gets better because when we talked about getting married, Anna said that she wanted to have my baby. Not just a baby, my baby. She said she wanted to see a little Kunken running around our home. Now, this, I must say, seemed impossible. At the time, I had been paralyzed for more than 30 years, and I was already in my 50s. But there is a saying in the military that I've always liked, which goes, the difficult we do at once, the impossible takes a little longer. Well, we were determined to make the impossible happen, and we wanted to do it sooner rather than later. So we looked into various options, including in vitro fertilization, and we're very excited to learn it still may be possible for someone in my condition to father a child. So we pursued in vitro, and through the miracle of science, Anna became pregnant. And on January 24th, 2005, I was present in the delivery room when my wife Anna gave birth to triplets. We have three beautiful, incredible sons, Joey, Jimmy, and Timmy, who are now sophomores at three different colleges in upstate New York. And I cannot be happier or more proud of my wife and children than I am today.
Yes, it's great to hear that, one of your goals in life after your injury was to not let your injury hold you back, to do these things you wanted to do. And it sounds like truly opposites did attract, for you to have the family you have now. But it sounds like, with the power of science, things that came to fruition. And so what, has it been like, raising now collegiate boys, and navigating with not one, but three babies in the home?
It's been the most exciting adventure and journey I could possibly ever imagine. It is just, it's the best part of my life, morning, noon, and night. To wake up and see my incredible boys, to see my loving wife, and know that we work together as a team to try and accomplish whatever it is any one of us needs to do. And I might add that my boys have been very helpful growing up and helping me every way they could, whether it be they may help feed me or open a door or turn on a light, or even when we go places before the Americans with Disabilities, well, even after that, they would go and look and say, Dad, they have a ramp there. You could go there. And they would check without me even asking them that. And they've been just wonderful, wonderful children, and very respectful and very, very bright. In fact, they teach me how to use the computer. They're so much better at it than I am. So it's just been a wonderful uh, journey. And I might add, I still have a lot of problems with my blood pressure. And one day when the boys were really little, just to give you a short story, I went to the local Stop and Shop supermarket. We went there alone, just my son Joey, who was probably, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 at the time. Um, Maybe a little older, maybe close to 9. And we went alone. We walked there. And while I was there, I got very dizzy. And I knew I needed Joey to lift up my legs to help get the blood to flow back to my head. And Joey did it without hesitation, didn't panic, even though he knew I was in distress. And even though a crowd was gathering, he never asked for help. He never cried, but he lifted up my legs until I was feeling a little better, gave me a blood pressure pill to increase my pressure, and actually was so competent that he made me feel better. And just knowing that I was in good hands when I was with my 9-year-old son. And that's the way my boys have been their whole life. I know when I'm with them, I'm protected. They protect me and help me in every way that they can. And it's just incredible. And I might add that Joey is now actually going to Cornell, my alma mater. And he started there 50 years after I graduated. My son Joey was a freshman there. My son Timmy is at Syracuse University, where he's pursuing a dual major in communications at the Newhouse School of Communications and the Maxwell School of Public Affairs. And my son James is at the State University of Morrisville studying renewable energy. So the boys are at 3 different colleges, but have remained very close with each other. They do FaceTime calls all the time. They visit each other in school and have remained very close, which makes me feel really, really good.
Yeah, definitely a proud father moment. Sounds like you've raised some great young men who will hopefully have prosperous futures. And so, why is it, that you have decided to share more about your story, to author a book, and kind of put yourself and your life out into the world?
I was encouraged for many, many years to do inspirational, motivational talking. And I've kind of resisted it initially after, I went to school before I got married. because I kept thinking to myself and saying, I didn't think I did anything that special. I mean, yes, I went to school and got some degrees, and yes, I was working, but I know a lot of other people have done those things. But once my boys were born, and they were all very healthy, but when, triplets are born, they're usually born prematurely and they're in the NICU for a while. And I could remember sitting by their incubators in the NICU and looking at them, and it was like a revelation. It was like, whoa, this is big. It's time for me to share my story. And as a result, I did a good deal of motivational speaking before a lot of groups and organizations, and decided that the best way to get my story out to as many people as I could is to write a book about my life. And with my wife's help, we spent a lot of time working on it, and it was published last year. The book is called I Dream of Things That Never Were, the Ken Kunken Story. And I've received a lot of nice comments on people that have read it. And I'd just like to add where I got the title of my book. While I was still a patient in the rehab center, I had the opportunity to testify before a United States Senate Health Subcommittee chaired by Senator Edward Kennedy. And 8 days after my testimony, Senator Kennedy sent me a glass paperweight in the mail that had an inscription on it that he said his late brother Robert Kennedy liked very much. And the inscription read, "Some men see things as they are and say why. I dream of things that never were and say why not." That's why I got the title of my book, I Dream of Things That Never Were, because those words have always been very meaningful to me.
Yes, yeah, to have that moment and have that inscription, given to you at a young age to figure out, where life is going to take you. With a title such as that, you were originally in college for engineering, you were good at math. What was your original career intentions?
Well, I knew that I wanted to do something with my math ability because that was clearly where I was the strongest. And in fact, right before my junior year, I actually had an interview with an insurance company about becoming an actuary, where you deal a lot with numbers and figures. And I thought that sounded like an interesting career as well. And to be an actuary, you need to take a series of exams. And I was actually scheduled to take my first exam on the Wednesday when I got hurt the Saturday before, just 5 days earlier. So my career goals changed a number of times. I was thinking maybe I would teach math, maybe I would go into some type of business where I could find use for my math ability. But following my injury, I never realized that, I had the ability to get up in front of a group and speak. I always thought I was a bit of an introvert before my injury. I would sit in the back of the classroom, not raise my hand, and just try and blend in with the crowd. And following my injury, I was surprised when I was asked to speak before a lot of different large audiences about myself, no less. And I think I was even more surprised when the words came out of my mouth and I was able to do it. And I decided that, it opened a whole new field for me. And what I really wanted to do was to work with people and try and help them and provide them with better help, care, and support than I felt I was being given following my injury. And as a result, I pursued majors where first I majored in education, I majored in psychology for 2 different degrees in counseling, and then ultimately law school. And I'm very proud of the background I had because I think each degree has helped me function better as not only a professional, but just as a person in general.
Of course, they've definitely given you this well-rounded background to be able to lead the career you've led. And it sounds like, even if math was such a strong suit, like you found passion and goodness in the career that you've had, even though there hasn't been a math focus.
Thank you. And as I indicated, now I've written a book that I want to share with people, and it's available on Amazon, but it's available other places as well. And if somebody wants to purchase it, they can go on my website, which is kenkunken.com, and it indicates a number of different ways that it could be purchased, including if they want to give it as gifts, how they could buy it in bulk.
Right. Well, I will, of course, make sure to leave your website in the description so that people can check that out if they're interested in reading the book. And of course, your life may not have been, what you originally wanted, but you're sharing your story now. You've learned so much about your life. What would you say to somebody who doesn't necessarily know what their future looks like or where they want to go? Like, what sort of advice would you give to someone who's just starting out and trying to figure out where should I be in the world?
Well, try and explore different options. I mean, I always indicate for anybody, try and get the best education possible and never stop learning. And getting the best education could involve different types of educations, but also studying different subjects because there may be an area that you've never even thought about that once you hear somebody talking about it, brings out an interest in you. And also just speaking to others about the type of work they do. And if you can, to watch people on the job and see what looks interesting. Now, I was very fortunate that my family was always so helpful and supportive. And that's one of the reasons why I ended up going into law, because I followed my brother, into the courtroom and observed what he did and spoke to him quite a bit about what it was like. But speaking to others, exposing yourself to different areas, not ruling out anything that you may not have considered, and being willing to actually change jobs and career goals after a while if you find you have a passion for something else, um, can be really helpful. And I think if you could become an intern while you're in school, you know, to be exposed to other jobs and get some hands-on experience can be real helpful as well. I mean, I was an intern at the DA's office. I didn't know that's what I would like to do until I actually was an intern and tried it. And, you know, I've tried to supervise a lot of interns while I worked there to give them that experience and expose them to what the field of law is like and to talk to them in general about their career goals. But also, I'd just like to add in my work at the Viscardi Center, I'm now on their board of directors, and they help people with disabilities receive not only education, but training and placement help to get them into jobs and careers. And I'm so thankful that I could stay involved with helping people with disabilities because I think employers are now more and more realizing and seeing the enormous benefit in hiring people with disabilities. They're finding it just makes good business sense to hire a worker that's hardworking, dedicated, devoted, loyal, who just happens to have a disability and is doing their best to make something of their lives.
Yes, education is so important. And, bringing in diverse communities, and as disability gets more recognized and realized, like, you 100% can be part of society and be part of employment. It's great to hear, how you've gotten those chances to experience great working environments. Now you're retired. So what is retirement like for you?
Well, it's actually been pretty busy. I mean, in addition to now doing these podcasts, where I've done quite a number so far, as I indicated, I'm on the board of directors at the Viscardi Center and trying to stay actively involved with helping other individuals with disabilities. And I'm also obviously so enthused and excited about how my children are doing and trying to be active in their lives as best I can. And, we do most family celebrations. I have a large family. We do it here at our house, so it's a lot of entertaining. And it's just great to be involved with a lot of people, helping those when I can, and just taking part in so many different activities that it brings me a lot of joy. And I recently was asked to be a part of the Cornell University Council. So now I'm on that as well. And in fact, I'll be going up to Cornell in just over a week to take part in my first meeting on the Cornell University Council. And they're actually going to have a book signing for me up there on Thursday, October 17th, up at the school. So, you say I'm retired. I think I've never been more busy than I am right now.
But it sounds like you're enjoying what you're doing and being a part of the communities you're in. So it sounds like, retirement's the right place for you right now.
It really is. Being retired has given me the opportunity to do even more with my life than when I was working at a 9 to 5 job.
Yes. Now, before I start to wrap things up, is there anything else you would like to share with the listeners today?
Well, there's so much that you can do with a disability, but the first thing I want to share is it is so important to keep your hopes up. There have been so many times where I felt people have tried to dash my hopes, following my injury. And I think it's so important to encourage people to keep hope, to keep their hopes alive, right? And to believe in themselves, to believe they can do anything that they set their minds to. And one of the things that I try to talk about in my motivational talks is it's so important to keep expectations high. I mean, it was terrible when I was in the rehab center and I saw the fellow patients doing very little with their lives. And I think part of that was because they weren't encouraged by the medical personnel to do more. I felt like the expectations for the fellow patients were so low that people no longer had the motivation to exceed them. And it's, when you think about somebody's expectations, they can really have a strong influence on what other people eventually do with their lives. Because people's performance often rises and falls based upon what others expect of them. So it's so important to keep your expectations high, and not only for others, but for yourself as well. There's an awful lot you can do through hard work, determination, discipline, perseverance, and the right attitude. And that last trait may be the most important one of all.
Definitely. Attitude there, affects everything else.
Mm.
So I think those were some great words here to end on and for people to think about. So I appreciate you sharing that. Now, at the end of all my episodes, I do ask my guests a random question that doesn't have to do with what we've been talking about. So my question today for you is, what wild animal do you wish was domesticated?
Oh boy, that's a tough one. That's a tough one for me. But when I think of animals, I think now I've been exposed to at least seeing support animals, animals that are trained to help people with disabilities. I've seen the canine support system helping train dogs to help other individuals with disabilities. I even saw a facility that helped train horses to help people with disabilities. And I think it is so great to see that. I remember seeing many, many years ago on 60 Minutes, them doing an episode of training monkeys to help people with disabilities. So I love the fact that more and more you're seeing animals serve as support assistance to people with disabilities. And I think that's great to have that symbiotic relationship with an animal where you could help each other, help both do better with what they want to do. It keeps the animals happy and it helps people a lot.
All right, that brings this episode to a close. So, of course, as Ken mentioned, his website will be in the description if you would like to connect with him. His wife also has him on Facebook, so if you want to check him out on Facebook, that link will be there as well as an option to connect with him. So, of course, feel free to go check those out and or check his book out if you're interested in learning more. Of course, if you would like to connect with the podcast, our website is in the description as well. It brings you to all of our past episodes, resources from guests, and all of the good things. It brings you also to our social media. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. If you'd like to go follow those pages, that support is always appreciated. My email address is also in the description. That is the best way to reach me. If you'd like to be a guest on the show and share your story, I'd love to hear from you. And there is a link to support the podcast monetarily if you're interested in doing that as well. So thank you so much, Ken, for spending time with me today, and to my listeners for taking the time out of your day to hear a new story. Until next time, bye.
And thank you for giving me the opportunity to tell my story and to share it with all your listeners. I appreciate that opportunity. I really enjoyed meeting you and having this discussion, and I look forward to continuing having a friendship with you and with your listeners. Thank you.